The containment field collapsed at 0347 hours, and the ship's core began consuming itself. I had 17 minutes before the gravitational implosion would tear through the hull and drag everything within 2 kilometers into a singularity the size of a marble. The emergency console flashed red, demanding what it had demanded for 3 centuries: Royal Kelthry DNA to authorize emergency restart protocols. Every member of the royal family had been dead for 294 years. I stood in the command chamber of the Ascendant Dawn, humanity's captured prize from the Kelthry Empire, watching frost spread across the walls as the containment failure bled heat into the void. My breath came out in clouds. The alien symbols on the crystalline control surface pulsed with increasing urgency, a rhythm that matched my accelerating heartbeat. Behind me, 37 colonists waited in the observation gallery, their faces pressed against the transparent aluminum barrier. They had trusted me to get them to New Carpathia. Now they would die because I couldn't unlock a dead empire's failsafe. The Kelthry Queen stood motionless in her suspension chamber along the starboard wall, exactly where she had stood for the past 11 years since her capture. Her chitinous form gleamed like polished obsidian, 6 limbs folded in a position that our xenobiologists claimed indicated meditation or deep thought. Her compound eyes, each the size of my fist, remained fixed on some distant point beyond the hull. The suspension field kept her conscious but paralyzed, a living trophy from humanity's first and only victory against the empire that had pushed us to the edge of extinction. I had never spoken to her. Protocol demanded silence. She was evidence, not an ally. The ship groaned, metal shrieking as structural supports began to buckle. 14 minutes remained. I placed my hand against the DNA scanner again, knowing it would fail, hoping some cosmic accident might convince the ancient technology that human blood could substitute for Kelthry royalty. The scanner pulsed red. Rejection. Always rejection. My daughter's voice cut through the emergency klaxons. "Daddy, why is the pretty lady watching us?" I spun around. Maya stood 3 meters away, having slipped through the observation barrier while I'd been fixated on the console. She was 7 years old, wearing the blue jumpsuit all colony children wore, her dark hair pulled back in the tight braid her mother had woven that morning. She shouldn't have been here. She should have been in the evacuation pods with the other non-essential personnel, but the pods had lost power 6 minutes ago when the containment failure cascaded through the auxiliary systems. "Maya, go back to the gallery." I kept my voice level despite the ice spreading through my chest. "Now!" She didn't move. Her attention remained locked on the Kelthry Queen, and, for the first time since her capture, I saw the Queen's eyes shift. The massive compound lenses rotated in their sockets, ancient muscles moving beneath armored carapace, until her gaze settled directly on my daughter. The Queen's mandibles moved. A clicking sound emerged, soft and rhythmic, almost like language. Maya tilted her head, listening with the complete focus only children possess. The temperature in the command chamber dropped another 5 degrees. 11 minutes until implosion. "She says the ship is scared," Maya said quietly. "She says it's dying because it thinks everyone is gone." My hands froze halfway to the emergency kit on my belt. "What?" "The ship remembers her," Maya continued, her eyes never leaving the Queen's face. "It's lonely. It wants to hear her voice." I looked at the Kelthry Queen, really looked at her for the first time in 11 years. The suspension field sparked and flickered, power fluctuating as the containment failure spread through ship systems. Her eyes remained fixed on Maya, and, in their multifaceted depths, I saw something I had never allowed myself to consider. Not rage. Not hatred. Something far more dangerous. Understanding. The ship shuddered violently, and the deck plates beneath my feet cracked. Emergency lighting failed, plunging us into the dim red glow of backup systems. 9 minutes remained. The colonists in the gallery had begun screaming, throwing themselves against the barrier, demanding answers I couldn't provide. I moved to the suspension field controls before I could reconsider. My fingers found the manual release, the one we'd been ordered never to touch under any circumstances. The one that would either save us all or unleash a warrior queen who had personally commanded the fleets that glassed 7 human colonies. "If I release you," I said, my voice steady despite the terror clawing up my throat, "will you save the ship?" The queen's mandibles clicked again, faster this time, a cascade of sounds that my translator implant struggled to parse. Maya stepped closer to the suspension chamber, placing her small hand against the energy barrier. The field rippled, and the queen's nearest limb moved fractionally, as if reaching toward my daughter through the wall of frozen light. "She says yes," Maya whispered. "But Daddy," she's crying. "She says all her children are gone too." I triggered the release. The suspension field collapsed with a sound like shattering crystal, and the Kelthari queen took her first free breath in 11 years. She rose to her full height, 3 meters of evolved killing machine, her wings unfurling with a snap that echoed through the command chamber. The colonists' screams reached a fever pitch. The queen moved past me without a glance, her taloned feet clicking against the deck plates with perfect precision. She approached the DNA scanner, placed one chitinous hand against its surface, and spoke a single word in her own language. The ship's core recognized its empress. Every system surged to life simultaneously, containment field stabilizing, power flooding through dead circuits, the gravitational implosion reversing in an instant. The Ascendant Dawn stopped dying and remembered how to live. The queen turned to face me, her massive form silhouetted against the reactivated command displays. For 3 heartbeats, neither of us moved. Then, she lowered her head in what our xenobiologists would later identify as a gesture of acknowledgement between equals. She looked at Maya one final time, mandibles moving in that soft clicking pattern that sounded almost like gratitude, before walking calmly back to her suspension chamber and standing in position. "She wants to go back to sleep," Maya said softly. "She says she's very tired, and her war is over." I reactivated the suspension field with shaking hands, watching the energy barrier reform around the queen's motionless form. Her eyes found mine one last time, and I saw the weight of centuries in that alien gaze. The weight of loss. The weight of duty. The weight of knowing you're the last of something that once filled the stars. The ship hummed around us, healthy and whole, carrying its precious cargo of refugees and its ancient guardian toward a colony world neither of us would have chosen. Maya slipped her hand into mine, and I held it tight, feeling the warmth of living flesh against my palm. Behind us, the colonists had fallen silent, watching the queen in her chamber with new eyes. The emergency klaxons had stopped. The crisis had passed. But nothing would ever be quite the same. We had crossed a line drawn in royal blood and ancient protocol, and, on the other side, we had found not the enemy we expected, but something far more complicated. I began writing my report in my head, trying to find words that would explain what had happened without sounding insane. The queen had saved us. My daughter had spoken to her. The ship recognized its rightful sovereign. These were facts, documented and witnessed by 38 colonists and logged in the ship's systems. What I couldn't explain was the look in the queen's eyes when she watched my daughter. The recognition of something universal that transcended species and empire and 300 years of war. The look of someone who understood what it meant to protect the young, even when everything else had turned to ash. The Ascendant Dawn sailed on through the void, carrying humanity's future and its captive past toward whatever waited in the darkness ahead. And in her chamber, the last queen of the Kelthari Empire stood frozen in time, her compound eyes fixed on the stars she would never rule again, a living monument to endings and the strange grace that sometimes follows them. Maya tugged on my hand. "Daddy, can we visit her tomorrow? I think she's lonely." I looked at the Queen, at the ancient warrior standing sentinel over a ship full of the children of her enemies, and made a decision that would have gotten me court-martialed a year ago. "Yes, sweetheart. We can visit her tomorrow." The frost on the walls began to melt as the environmental systems restored proper heating. Water ran down crystalline control surfaces like tears, pooling on deck plates that had almost become our tomb. I initiated the post-crisis diagnostic sequence, checking each system the Queen's command had brought back online, and found them all functioning at optimal capacity. The ship responded to my touch with an eagerness it had never shown before, as if the ancient vessel had been waiting all these years for someone to speak its true name. The colonists began filing out of the observation gallery, their voices hushed and uncertain. They gave me questioning looks as they passed, looking for assurance that I didn't have. I met their eyes and nodded, projecting confidence I didn't feel, because that was what leaders did. That was what my daughter needed to see. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and the Queen's eyes wouldn't stop watching from behind the suspension field, and I knew with absolute certainty that humanity had just learned something about the universe that would change everything. The question was whether we were wise enough to understand it. We reached the outer marker of New Carpathia's solar system 42 hours later. The colony station's traffic control hailed us with the usual efficiency, guiding us toward Orbital Dock 7 with practiced precision. I sat in the command chair, watching the green and blue planet grow larger on the view screen, and tried to formulate the conversation I would need to have with colonial administration. Maya spent those 42 hours sitting outside the Queen's suspension chamber, drawing pictures on her tablet and talking in the soft, steady voice children use when speaking to something they're trying to understand. I monitored her from the command station, watching through internal cameras as she showed the frozen Queen her artwork and told stories about her mother, and described the flowers she wanted to plant when we reached the surface. The Queen never moved, but her eyes tracked every gesture, absorbed every word with the complete attention of someone drinking water after a lifetime of drought. The xenobiologist, Dr. Sarah Chen, approached me on the second day. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Commander Reeves, we need to discuss the situation with the Calthary prisoner." I gestured to the observation monitors. "She's not a prisoner anymore, Doctor. She's a passenger. She's a war criminal responsible for millions of human deaths," Chen said quietly. "And your daughter has been sitting outside her chamber for 6 hours straight. My daughter saved 38 lives by understanding something we've spent 11 years ignoring." "I kept my eyes on the view screen." "The Queen is as much a refugee as we are. Her empire is dead. Her species is extinct except for her. She has nowhere to go and no one to return to. That doesn't change what she's done." "No," I agreed. "But it might change what she does next." Chun was silent for a long moment, watching Maya on the monitor. "The child asked me about Calthary reproduction yesterday. Wanted to know if the Queen had children." My chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That Calthary queens produce millions of offspring over their lifetime. But the Queen was captured during the war before her first breeding cycle. She never had children of her own." Chan's voice softened. "The girl cried. Then she drew a picture of flowers and told the Queen she was sorry." I found Maya in the chamber at 0200 hours, curled up against the wall beneath the suspension field, fast asleep. The Queen stood above her, motionless and eternal, but I could have sworn the angle of her head had shifted, tilted downward as if watching over something precious. I gathered Maya into my arms, and her eyes fluttered open. Is it time to go to the planet? Soon, sweetheart. We dock in the morning. Can the Queen come with us? She likes flowers. I can tell. I looked up at the ancient warrior, at the last remnant of an empire that had tried to exterminate humanity, and saw my daughter's drawings scattered around the base of the suspension chamber. Flowers. Gardens. Families holding hands beneath alien suns. I don't know, I said honestly. That's not my decision to make. Colonial Governor Marcus Webb listened to my report with the expression of a man watching his carefully ordered world collapse into chaos. His office overlooked New Carpathia's primary settlement, 15,000 souls building new lives on a planet that smelled like cinnamon and rain. Through the window, I could see Maya playing in the civic garden with other colony children, her laughter carrying on the wind. You're telling me, Webb said carefully, that you released a Calthary War Queen from containment, gave her full access to ship systems, and allowed your 7-year-old daughter to establish communication with her. She was already communicating, Governor. We just weren't listening. Webb poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. The Admiralty will have you shot for this. Probably. I met his eyes. But we're alive. The ship is functional. And we've learned that the Kelthari aren't the mindless destroyers we thought they were. They glassed 7 colonies, Commander. 7. 300 million dead. I know. The weight of those numbers never left me. But wars are fought by the desperate and the frightened. The Queen told Maya something through their translator implant. She said the Empire attacked because they thought we would destroy them first. Fear drove everything. Webb took a long drink. That's not how the history books record it. History books are written by survivors looking backward. We have the chance to write something different going forward. By doing what? Granting asylum to the galaxy's most wanted war criminal. By recognizing that she's the last of her species, and treating her accordingly. I stood, pacing to the window. Maya was showing another child how to plant bulbs in the rich soil. The Kelthari Empire is extinct, Governor. Every hive world was sterilized in the final offensive. Every ship was destroyed. Every genetic archive was burned. The Queen is what remains. A living monument to extinction. Some would say that's justice. Some would be wrong. I turned back to face him. Justice would be understanding why the war happened and preventing the next one. Justice would be showing the universe that humanity is better than the empire we destroyed. Webb was quiet for a long time, watching the children in the garden. The Admiralty will never approve. Then, we don't ask permission. New Carpathia is an independent colony, barely integrated into the broader network. What happens here is your jurisdiction. You're asking me to commit political suicide. I'm asking you to do what's right instead of what's easy. He laughed, a bitter sound without humor. Those are the words of someone who's never held power, Commander. Everything is compromise. Everything is calculation. Right and easy are luxuries for philosophers. Then, consider it pragmatically. I said, the Queen knows things about the galaxy that humanity has never learned. Technology. Navigation. Species we haven't encountered. She could be the most valuable resource in human space if we're smart enough to recognize it. Or she could be a threat waiting for the right moment to strike. She had that moment 42 hours ago. She saved us instead. Webb finished his drink and set the glass down with deliberate precision. I'll need to think about this. In the meantime, the Queen remains in suspension aboard the Ascendant Dawn. No contact except essential monitoring. And your daughter stays on the planet. I wanted to argue, but I recognized the tone. This was the compromise, the calculation he'd spoken about. I nodded and left his office, my boots heavy on the polished floor. Maya was waiting outside the administrative building, covered in dirt and grinning. I planted 17 flowers, Daddy. The man said they'll bloom in 30 days. I knelt down and brushed soil from her cheek. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Can we bring some to the Queen? I think she'd like them. My throat tightened. Maybe later, Maya. The governor needs to make some decisions first. She looked at me with the complete clarity children possess, the ability to see through adult complications to the truth beneath. He's scared of her. Yes. That's silly. She's sad, not scary. Sometimes scared people can't tell the difference. The decision came 3 days later, delivered by a junior administrator who wouldn't meet my eyes. The Queen would remain in suspension indefinitely. The Ascendant Dawn would be stripped of essential components and converted to orbital storage. No further contact would be permitted except for monthly life support verification. I took the news to Maya, who received it with the quiet devastation of a child learning that adults break promises. She didn't cry. She just nodded and went to her room, and that was somehow worse than tears. That night, I sat in my quarters staring at the data pad containing the official order. Through the window, I could see the Ascendant Dawn in high orbit, a dark shape against the stars. Somewhere aboard that ship, the last queen of the Kelthari Empire stood frozen, alone, forgotten. A problem sealed away rather than solved. My communicator chimed. Dr. Chen's voice came through, urgent and strained. Commander, you need to see this. The Queen's biosigns are changing. I reached the orbital shuttle in 15 minutes, Maya somehow materializing beside me as I ran through the darkened streets. I should have sent her back. I should have followed protocol. But the look in her eyes told me she would find a way aboard with or without me, and at least this way I could keep her safe. The Ascendant Dawn greeted us like an old friend, airlocks opening smoothly, corridors lighting our path to the command chamber. Dr. Chen met us at the entrance, her face pale in the emergency lighting. She's dying, Chen said without preamble. The suspension field is failing, but her vital signs are crashing too fast. It's not mechanical failure. She's choosing this. Maya pushed past us both, running to the suspension chamber. The Queen stood as she always had, perfect and still, but something had changed in her eyes. The light behind them was dimming, ancient fire banking to embers. No. Maya pressed her hands against the energy barrier. No, you can't. Please don't. The Queen's mandibles moved slowly, clicking out a rhythm that our translator implants parsed into words. Little one. My war is over. My empire is dust. I am tired. Let me rest. But I planted flowers. Maya's voice broke. I planted them for you. They're going to bloom. Then they will bloom for you, and you will remember the old queen who listened to your stories. The clicking grew softer. You showed me kindness when all I deserved was judgment. You gave me peace in my final days. This is enough. I moved to the suspension controls, hands hovering over the medical override. I can stabilize the field. Chen, prepare emergency medical. No. The Queen's voice cut through my panic with absolute authority. I choose this end. I choose to die free, having saved the children of my enemies, having heard laughter one final time. Do not take this choice from me. Maya was crying now, tears streaming down her face. It's not fair. Everyone you loved is gone. Everyone I wanted you to meet is down there. You should see the flowers. You should see the planet. I should rest, little one. As should you, when your time comes, many years from now. The Queen's eyes found mine. Human, you tried to save me. This is rare. Remember that mercy is not weakness. Remember that the greatest warriors are those who choose peace when war is easier. Teach this to your daughter. Teach this to your species. The biosigns on the monitor flatlined. The Queen's eyes dimmed completely, compound lenses going dark like stars dying one by one. Her body remained upright, held in place by the suspension field, a statue of obsidian and regret. Maya collapsed against the barrier, sobbing. I gathered her into my arms and held her while she cried for a creature that had killed millions but had shown her nothing but gentleness. Dr. Chen deactivated the suspension field, and the queen's body settled into its final rest, dignified even in death. We held the funeral at sunrise, on a hillside overlooking New Carpathia's primary settlement. Against all protocols and recommendations, I had the queen's body brought to the surface and cremated according to Calthari tradition as documented in our xenological archives. 17 colonists attended, all survivors from the Ascendant Dawn, all people who had watched a dead empire's last queen choose to save them. Governor Webb arrived as we scattered her ashes in the garden where Maya had planted flowers. He stood at the back, silent and observing, his face unreadable. Maya placed a small bouquet of native flowers at the center of the memorial circle we created. They weren't the bulbs she planted. Those would take another 27 days to bloom. But she insisted the queen would understand. Dr. Chen spoke first, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. I studied the Calthari for 15 years. I learned their biology, their social structures, their military tactics. But I never understood them until I watched a dying queen choose mercy over revenge. We were her captors, her enemies, the destroyers of everything she loved. She could have let us die. Instead, she saved us and asked for nothing in return except to rest. That is not the action of a monster. That is the action of someone who had seen enough death and refused to add to it. Others spoke, sharing memories of the moment the ship had come back to life, the impossible choice I'd made, the strange peace that had settled over the vessel in the days that followed. They spoke of fear transformed into understanding, of hatred giving way to grief. When it was my turn, I looked at Maya standing beside me, her hand gripping mine with fierce determination. The queen told my daughter that mercy is not weakness. I think she was wrong. I think mercy is the hardest form of strength, the one that requires us to see our enemies as people who are also afraid, also desperate, also capable of change. The war with the Calthari Empire ended when we destroyed their last hive world. But the war inside ourselves, the one that demands we hate forever and trust never, that war ended 3 days ago when an ancient queen chose love over vengeance and peace over pride. I scattered the last of her ashes into the wind, watching them drift across the garden where children played and flowers grew. The weight of her sacrifice settled into the soil, becoming part of something new. Governor Webb approached as the mourners dispersed. He stood beside me, looking out over the settlement, hands clasped behind his back. The Admiralty is going to have questions, he said quietly. Let them ask. They'll want to know why I permitted this ceremony, why I allowed the enemy's remains on our colony world. Tell them the truth. Tell them we learned something about ourselves that's worth more than revenge. Webb was silent for a long moment. I drafted a proposal. A memorial to the Calthari Empire, not celebrating their actions but acknowledging their extinction. A reminder that the cost of war is measured in civilizations, not just casualties. I'm going to recommend New Carpathia become a sanctuary world. No military installations, no weapons development, no preparation for the next conflict. Just a place where people remember what was lost and try to build something better. I looked at him in surprise. The Admiralty will never approve. Probably not. But I'm an old man, Commander, and I've spent my career calculating acceptable losses and managing acceptable cruelties. Just once, I'd like to be on the right side of history instead of the practical side. He smiled, a tired expression that held decades of compromise. Your daughter taught me that. Her and a dead queen. Maya tugged on my sleeve, pointing toward the eastern edge of the garden. Daddy, look. One of the bulbs had bloomed early, a single flower pushing through the soil ahead of its siblings. It was red and gold, with petals that caught the morning light like fragments of stained glass. Impossible and beautiful and exactly what Maya had promised. We walked to the flower and knelt beside it. Maya touched the petals with the careful reverence of someone handling something sacred. She kept her promise, Maya whispered. She got to see one bloom after all. I wrapped my arm around my daughter's shoulders and felt the future shift beneath our feet. Not dramatically, not with thunder and proclamation, but in the quiet way that all meaningful changes begin, with a child's compassion, an old warrior's final mercy, and a single flower blooming ahead of its time. The ascendant dawn remained in orbit, a monument to survival and strange grace. Eventually, we would convert it to a museum, a place where people could stand in the command chamber, where enemies became something more complicated than hatred allowed. But that would come later. For now, we had a garden to tend and flowers to nurture and a future to build from the ashes of empires that had learned too late that mercy was stronger than war. Maya stood and took my hand. Can we come back tomorrow? I want to tell the flower about the queen. Every day if you want, sweetheart. We walked down the hillside together, leaving the memorial circle and its single perfect bloom to the morning sun. Behind us, in the soil of a colony world built by refugees and dreamers, the last trace of the Kelthari Empire took root and prepared to transform into something no one could have predicted. Not an ending. Not quite a beginning. Something stranger and more hopeful, a continuation, written in flowers and forgiveness and the infinite patience of those who choose to see tomorrow instead of yesterday. The stars watched in silence, as they always had, waiting to see what humanity would become now that we had learned the hardest lesson empires never survive long enough to understand, that the enemy's last breath can teach us more than their first battle cry, and that sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is put down their weapon and listen to a child talk about flowers. 2/2